Wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you all for being here. This is awesome. Even though many of you are not on camera, it's great to see so many of our new folks who are coming here for the first time. And then, of course, seeing the names of so many friends and colleagues who have been with us for a long time. So thank you all. Since he donned his white coat in 1972, Dennis Novack has been dedicated to teaching and research in enhancing physician-patient communication and professionalism. He has implemented his published research in two practical applications, DocCom and professional formation, online training programs for students, residents, clinicians, and healthcare personnel. In the age of interprofessionalism, he has adapted both applications for the interdisciplinary practice. On ResearchGate, Dr. Novack is recognized in the top 5% of cited researchers worldwide and among the top 3% of researchers on academia.edu, platforms which collect paper citations. His papers, 4 of which have been published in JAMA, have received thousands of citations and have been influential in shaping clinicians' communication techniques and have been the basis for medical education curricula. Dr. Novack has obtained over $2 million from foundations for his research. Over 70 of his research studies have been published in peer-reviewed journals. Dr. Novack has presented his research and educational contributions at over 250 conferences. 2 of his greatest research contributions are used daily to help train learners in communication and professionalism. DocCom, which consists of 42 online communication modules and over 400 unscripted videos, many of which are annotated, was launched in 2005 as a result of the Kalamazoo Conference, an invitational meeting of 21 leaders, which Dr. Novack attended in 1999. Representing major medical education and professional organizations, the group produced the Kalamazoo Consensus Statement identifying the essential elements of communication in medical encounters with patients. These elements became the foundation of the DocCom modules, which have been used by nearly 90,000 learners in over 20 countries around the world. 10 research articles have been published around the value of DocCom. After learning that students who experience professional lapses were at greater risk of being disciplined as physicians by state boards, Dr. Novack founded Professional Formation. The online platform has 14 modules about professionalism for learners, plus development and remediation modules for faculty. With launch of the program in the spring of 2020, the modules are free during COVID. After several years of research, Dr. Novack received another Macy grant to create a module on anti-racism, which will be piloted next year. Not only has Dr. Novack conducted innovative studies, but he's been a champion of supporting other clinicians' research as well. As the founder and editor of Medical Encounter, he encouraged and guided researchers' preparation of their papers published in this peer-reviewed journal for over 20 years. In 2020, Dr. Novack was honored with the George L. Engel Award for outstanding research contribution to theory, practice, and teaching of effective healthcare communication and related skills from the Academy of Communication in Healthcare. Welcome, Dennis. You have had an incredibly impressive career.
That was a really long introduction. I was starting to get bored in the middle of it. I'm sorry. It's like, oh man. Okay. Yes. Well, I've worked hard over the years.
Yeah. Well, it's great. I mean, it's a tribute to the work that you've done and the amount of influence that you've had. Not to mention, for those of you who don't know, Dennis is a really fantastic musician as well. And if you ever get a chance to watch him play in a variety of instruments and with his band that he's had for 30 years now, that's pretty fantastic too.
Yeah, 35 years.
35.
With medical students.
So I'm actually going to start by going way back with some of these questions and start with your background in psychiatry. So you're a psychiatrist by training, and you've been an active member for many years of the American Psychosomatic Society that focuses on research into mind-body interactions. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what influence your background in psychiatry and work with the APS has had on your work today in medical professionalism.
So just so everybody knows, this is an unscripted interview. We didn't go over these questions ahead of time. Otherwise, I would have corrected you that I'm actually not a psychiatrist. So I'm an internist. Now, the interesting thing was I wanted to be a psychiatrist in medical school. My wife, so I'm now married over 52 years, but my wife at the time told me that if I went into psychiatry, she would divorce me because she thought I would screw up our kids, So, by that time, I actually started really enjoying internal medicine. I thought, okay, well, if I go into psychiatry at that time, you had to have a medicine internship or a rotating internship. So I said, okay, I'll try for an internal medicine residency. But if I still want to be a psychiatrist at the end of that year, I'll convince her that I can do it. But then I fell in love with internal medicine, and I realized you can do a heck of a lot of psychiatry in internal medicine. So I kind of had the best of both worlds. And when it came time to figure out what specialty I wanted to go into, everybody was going into cardiology or GI, and none of that interested me, but the doctor-patient relationship really did. And somewhere around fourth year medical school or my internship, I started thinking, the way faculty are treating patients is really wrong. Everybody's so interested in differential diagnosis, but a lot of my patients are left cold when the house staff leave, and even upset and worse off emotionally than before the attending and the house staff came around. And I started thinking, this education we're getting is not good. It leaves out the humanity of the patient. Then I thought somebody has to do something about that. And then I thought, well, maybe I can do something about that. So I learned about George Engel's fellowship in Rochester, New York, and applied for that. And I was lucky enough to become a part of that. I was in a group of 4 internists and 3 psychiatrists, fellows, and I was there for 2 years. And George Engel, who published his need for a new medical model, the biopsychosocial model in Science in 1977, that's when I was there working with him. That one paper, I looked it up the other day, that one paper has been cited 16,625 times as of a week ago. That's about 16,000 times more than my papers have been. No, I guess maybe I've had a few, but that's a lot of citations. So Engel was this really brilliant internist and psychiatrist. And one day he came into my office and said, okay, you're going to the Psychosomatic Society. And I was in, and that was my first, the beginnings of a love affair with psychophysiology and seeking to understand all the intricacies of how mind and body worked together, and how the biopsychosocial model actually created mechanisms that would help average physicians, the internist, the family doc, the PA, help them understand patients in their full humanity. So I was in that society for about 50 years. The last couple of years, because of COVID, I haven't gone to the meetings. I was president of that society about 20 years ago. And the way you become president of a society, by the way, like this, is you just volunteer, I volunteered. I was on the board, and then I can't even remember. I was chair. I chaired several committees, and eventually they said, okay, it's your turn to be president, So any of you out there who have aspirations to leadership, please volunteer at APHC, because one day you too could be treasurer or secretary or president. Yes. So so that's how the Psychosomatic Society shaped my understanding and teaching, and patient care.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And one of the other things that's interesting too is, we all have a narrative. We all have a story of how we came into medical professionalism. And many of you know, in my case at Gundersen, I was essentially told by our program directors, develop a professionalism curriculum for residents. That's how I got invested in APHC. For you, Dennis, what I'm curious about is, was there a particular occurrence or maybe a subset of occurrences that happened that was your inflection point toward becoming interested in medical professionalism? What actually drove you there?
Yeah, definitely. So, we've had a long process at Drexel for dinging people with unprofessional behaviors. But we were never into teaching professionalism until 2005, when Maxine Papadakis, we invited her to come and be a visiting scholar, and she gave her talk, showing how physicians who were cited by medical boards for unprofessionalism had a lot of were much more likely to be cited for unprofessionalism as medical students. And I walked out of that lecture with the person who became the curriculum dean and eventually our acting vice dean. We were talking about it, and I said, "Geez, we're good at knowing when somebody's unprofessional and punishing them, but what are we teaching? How are we teaching professionalism?" And that started a number of tries at doing a decent job at teaching professionalism. And we had a lot of false starts, I would say, in the first 4 or 5 years. And we were able to bring Steve Rosenzweig on board. I think Steve is maybe here. He was here earlier. And I started getting more familiar with Tom Inui's work, and Tom really, and his colleagues, Rabo and so on, really talked about the foundation of professionalism being professional formation, and that was a fulcrum for me, because I was one of those people who thought, no, you can't teach honesty and integrity. I mean, if you haven't learned that from your parents, by the time you're, 5 or 7 or 14 or whatever, we're not going to do that for you. But then I began to realize, no, wait a minute. We can promote professional growth. We can promote personal growth. And I had been doing a lot of that with the Academy on Communication in Healthcare before this. My colleagues and I started that way back in 1979. And all of our faculty development courses, which we're now on our 35th or 36th faculty development, 38th, I don't know, all had a component of self-awareness and using your self-awareness for the benefit of patients. So I had understood that there were ways to help people move along in their personal development, and that could underlie the process of professional development. And Steve Rosenzweig and Pam Duke and some others at our school really then pioneered a number of educational sessions, reflection sessions, and so on that really do help, I think, with that personal and professional growth.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. And the point that you are making about how we teach professionalism is vital. And it's actually a really nice segue into my next set of questions for you. So one of the reasons too about going over such a lengthy introduction for you, completely appropriate, and highlighting many of the ways in which you've helped innovate in this realm of technology and professionalism. You have been an innovator in web-based learning. right? And your work demonstrates that really nicely in developing the first virtual OSCEs and then publishing on that in 2002. And of course, your work with .com and professional formation. Dan Wolfson in the comments highlighted about how you helped with the Choosing Wisely campaign, which is, of course, gone viral in many ways in an online module as well. Can you tell us a bit about what motivated you to then invest your efforts into doing web-based learning, right? Because that certainly wasn't always the case, right? So what got you interested in saying, let's take this to the virtual environment?
Well, you know, when my college roomie bought the first Mac way back when, the Mac Classic or whatever it was called, he showed me one of the games he was playing, which was all text, but it was kind of an AI sort of thing. And I, you know, and we chatted, and then I went to sleep. I stayed over his house that evening in Washington, and like at around 11 at night, it was like the Mac was actually calling to me, you know. It was like, oh my God, you know, it was like a siren, you know. And I went downstairs and booted up his Mac and started playing that game and started realizing, well, we could teach interviewing this way, you know. And we did create some online interviewing tools using video and so on. We got a grant to do that like 25, 30 years ago. So it was really, you know, I saw that there are a lot of possibilities here, and that was very exciting to me. When actually it was the American Board of Internal Medicine approached a few of us in the leadership of the Academy on Communication and Healthcare about you know, putting some communication skills content online, and they had an idea of kind of putting a book online. And I said, geez, no, if we're going to do that, let's use all of the possibilities that a web-based resource can do, the interactivity, et cetera. And that was the germ of the idea to do .com. We were able to get a grant from the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations. And I was able to recruit Christoph Detweiler, who was just, I don't know, Daniel's online, and I appreciate Daniel Wolfson being here. Yeah, he gave us a grant to work on the Choosing Wisely campaign, and Christoph Detweiler, who was a physician but also an artist, or had already won a couple of all European software development awards. He's from Switzerland, and was doing a fellowship in the U.S. I managed to recruit him to help me with .com, and it was really his genius that made it so inviting and successful. And some of you on this call know of Christoph's work. Christoph unfortunately passed away. He died about in December of last year, 2020, just from a ruptured aortic aneurysm. He was only 56 years old. And he and I were partners for many years in developing .com, PF Professional Formation, many other projects online. So I want to acknowledge him, and I miss him dearly.
Yeah, that's having close colleagues, and that'll be something I actually ask you about in a little bit, of collaborators and those who are impactful on us. Before we get to there, curious, can you tell us a bit then also about the impact of these innovations on learners and what these learning environments have done for the field of medical professionalism in your eyes?
Well, professionally, .com I could say a lot about .com because we've, it's been out for over 15 years, and we have something like 45,000 active users, students who are using it now all over the world, and a number of studies that have been done that show an impact. Kind of when you combine it with workshops and all, have shown an impact on attitudes and behaviors and so on. PFO, professionalformation.org, is still so new. We were really we really set back on our heels a bit with COVID. We haven't been able to go back into our studio, for example, and our tech people were so involved at Drexel, putting everything online, that they had to abandon all the innovations that we were putting into PFO. So we hope to have PFO out for subscription in the spring of next year. And yeah, we have to charge some money for it, although it'll be very modest. But we have to charge just to keep it alive. It's extremely expensive to keep these kinds of programs online. So I'm hopeful. We got this grant from Macy to end racism in healthcare. We have 3 years, so we should be able to do it. And that's putting together a module on anti-racism and a whole faculty development program to go along with it. And we've got 11 institutions that are working with us on it or throughout the US. So there'll be a lot of research. Our learning management system has great capacity for data collection and research. So if people are interested in educating for professional formation, personal growth, and professionalism values, I think we'll be able to do a lot of qualitative and quantitative research with PFO, and that'll be in the years ahead.
Very good. And what are the current statuses of .com and PFO? That I know you said, especially at PFO, it's been hindered because of COVID. Here's sort of our future plans with it. Where are things currently? Well,
we're still, I believe, set to launch in the spring of 2022. Some of the features haven't been enabled yet. Like, for example, we have 1-minute selfie videos. So we have a lot of trigger videos, for example, and you'll see there's this video of me as an attending on the wards with a team, and I come out of a patient's room and make a fat joke, which Catherine Lucy says is one of the most frequent inappropriate comments made on the wards. I make a fat joke, and all my residents join in with their fat jokes about the patient. So the exercise associated with that is, if you're a third-year medical student on this team, what would you say? What would you say to the attending, or what would you say in the moment, or what would you say later if you had an opportunity for just a one-on-one with the attending? And they can type that in, and their contribution will become a blog post, and then they'll be able to see what everybody else in their group, like 9 other students, wrote. But they can also upload a 1-minute selfie video if that's the assignment, and they just point the video at themselves and say what they would say, and then the group members can vote on the most effective response. So, that's it's a little complex to put that up there, and there's you have to get permission to use them and so on. And so we're working through all that, but those kinds of things will be available. And we have this newsletter associated with PFO, and we can put some of the best videos from all over the country in the newsletter that people can see. So there's lots of exciting things coming with it. I think it'll do a lot of good. And you and I have talked about this. I wanted to be supportive of the APHC. and we'll have to work out how that's going to work.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, always that actually segues brilliantly to what I wanted to ask you about next, and that's around collaborations and thinking about those who you've collaborated with up to this point, especially in your long career with recently with APHC, but before then too. Could you tell us a bit about some of the notable collaborations you've had? Right, we all try to work very hard individually, but we don't get anywhere without our colleagues. And so I'm hoping you can just tell us some more about those collaborations, the ones that you look back on and say, these were really the notable moments in my life where I felt really proud and prideful in working with a variety of folks.
Yeah, that's funny you should ask that, because it's quite a lot of people. You know, my first paper was while I was I developed while I was at in my fellowship with Engel's group. I got the notion that, you know, it was wrong the way that doctors lied to patients about their cancer diagnosis, because about 15 years earlier there was a survey that showed that 90% of physicians lied to their patients about the cancer diagnosis. And one of my faculty members at the fellowship said, Art Schmalley said, "Oh, no, I'm a psycho-oncologist. No, that's not the way it is anymore." And I said, "Really? Nobody's shown that." So I took the same survey that Don Oken handed out in, 63 or whatever it was, and just, got together with an undergraduate student, who actually was she was the clerk at Ryder Truck Rental, when I was moving from Philadelphia to Rochester. She said, "You're moving to Rochester? I'm going to Rochester." "Oh, that's nice." Yeah. She said, "Yeah, what are you into?" I told her. She said, "Oh, if you ever need a student, call me." So when I got this idea, I called her, and she said, "Oh, my boyfriend is a statistician. Can he join too?" "Yeah, sure." So the three of us mimeographed these things and called doctors' offices. We got a good response eventually, and we that my first paper was in JAMA. I sent this this paper to JAMA, and they said, "This is pretty good. Yeah, we'll take this." I thought, well, this publication game is so easy, but yeah, that's the only time that's ever happened, and after that, I've had so many snarky comments in the margins of my paper. It's embarrassing, but that paper, was a collaboration between an undergraduate student and a graduate student statistician, and, and I've had several papers like that with medical students. So that's that undergrad students. So that was really fun for me. I guess the most satisfying collaborations in communication have been with other members of the Academy of Communication and Healthcare. Deborah Roeder and Bill Branch and Steve Cole and Rich Frankel and Howie Beckman and Tony Sookman, so many people who've really, so all of us were young Turks, growing up together and teaching each other. And 45 years later, we're still friends. And in fact, a bunch of us former leaders get together every couple of weeks over lunch, virtually, and still talk at this phase of our life. So those folks, and if you know anything about in the communication fields, they're really made quite big contributions to communication, occupation communication. And I have to say, it's been very satisfying at Drexel in the professionalism work to work with my colleagues, especially Steve Rosenzweig and my new friends and colleagues in our academy, I mean, David Dukas, who started this whole thing, he's an inspiration. Fred Hafferty, who I see is here. I knew Fred's work. Who didn't know Fred's work? But I read a number of his papers, but I got to know him pretty well, through my association with the Academy and his sort of generous contributions in leadership and, at our meetings. So, we have so many faculty who are brilliant and passionate and have their own points of view that contribute to me personally. So, I see Preston I've known since she was, I don't want to say a young chick, but I think she was maybe 32 years old when I first met her. She came to one of our courses way back when. Here she is, immediate past president, and started our fellowship program. So I see Beth Ryder, just on this, looking at the names here, Jazz Patel, Julie Agris, all of whom are making and have made major contributions. It's just, it's an amazing thing. And I think that's what our society offers young people too. I mean, the chance to interact with a whole bunch of experienced people who have, been around the block a few times and can be helpful. Without these societies, my work would be pretty lonely, I think, and not nearly as successful as whatever success I've been able to have.
That's fantastic. And certainly the new collaborations are in a lot of ways as invigorating as the original ones that we've had, and vice versa. Right? So that's awesome. Is there anything you would have done differently? Is there anything about the work that you've done or the course that you've taken that you would look back on and say, I might have made this step instead of this step?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I've always been someone who, I guess I got this from my folks, my mom and dad, my dad especially, who they were wide-eyed optimists, things will work out, and so I've always kind of embraced change. And the opportunities that change afforded. So, if I hadn't married my wife, Jan, I'd probably still be at Rochester, I have to say, because there's also a part of me that's comfortable and doesn't, like change, But Jan, is a go-getter, and after 2 winters in Rochester, she was ready, for a change. And we moved down to Charlottesville. I got a pretty good job offer there. We were there, and she went to law school there. And then I loved being in Charlottesville, living out, in the country. And I would have stayed there, but Jan was like, there's no place for me here. I want to be a public defender, and there are no public defenders in Charlottesville, and I'm a woman, and women aren't valued very highly these days. In Charlottesville, we're talking, 1981, 1980. She said, and I like the ocean, so fine, let's find a place near the ocean, So I looked around. I got a job offer at Brown, and there were a lot of great opportunities there. And then 12 years later, we had 3 kids, and I realized my kids were not getting to see their grandparents very often. and they needed to. And, we moved back to Philadelphia, and I was lucky enough to get a job at MCP, Medical College of Pennsylvania, which then became MCP Hahnemann, which then became Drexel after several bankruptcies. But in chaos, there's always opportunity. And, it's been a pretty good ride, and it's still fun. So, I look to the Cruises, who we've been fortunate enough to work with in our society. I went to I can't remember if Preston was there too. We went to a meeting where Sylvia Cruz presented, and after her presentation, we all sang "Happy Birthday" to her. She had turned 90 that day, and she's still, she was still making, contributions. So, hopefully, I'll, stay well, and be able to keep going. The work is fun.
Good. Yeah, that's brilliant, right? Age is more or less a number, right? But it's more about how you feel. So,
yeah, well, I still have a lot of aches and pains, but but I'm kind of ignoring them now. Mid 70s is not as much fun as I thought it might be. But I'm doing fine.
Well, speaking of age and numbers, 2022 is going to be an important year in medical professionalism. It's going to be the 20-year anniversary of ABIM's physician charter. It'll mark the 10-year anniversary of APHC. It'll mark a transition in APHC leadership, in which I'll be the outgoing president and you'll be our successor. And over my tenure, partly in response to the COVID pandemic, I've worked to try to adapt APHC to virtual environments, as well as focus more on the interprofessionalism elements of our organization. I'd like you, in the last few minutes that we have, to speak a bit on what you see as the value of APHC in the realm of medical professionalism, and what vision you have for the organization during your forthcoming tenure.
Yeah. I think the APHC is the place for scholarly work, both in educating for professionalism, in creating opportunities for professional formation for all healthcare students. So I'd like to see us expand a bit more into other health professions, learning environments, and interprofessional professionalism. I think that's critically important. I want to see us, I think this meeting was really created an important focus on, and Bob Wachter's talk at the beginning, the focus on the brave new world we've entered into. How do we preserve humanism and the physician, the clinician, patient-client relationship that has been really the foundation of healing for, 5,000 years, and all of a sudden, this world that Bob Wachter envisioned, where there's inputs from, all around your house, and it goes to middlemen companies that put all the information in digestible form, and it goes through AI and algorithms, and then doctors get what they get, and then maybe lower level practitioners or maybe even computer messages go to patients. I'm really worried about how we preserve the human connections that are so important. How do we resolve ethical dilemmas? You can't do that. You can't do that by AI or algorithms or people who are not actually trained and have some wisdom in the area. So I think we have quite a lot to do and a contribution to be made into what professionalism, education, and research looks like going forward, and how interprofessional professionalism gets expanded. So yeah, I think there's a lot to do. And Tom, I'm going to rely on you to keep in the loop, stay in the loop. I'm going to need you and your wisdom, and the folks on the board who are just really terrific contributors to our work.
Good. Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, and I can certainly tell you from my own experience, how many times do we review a chart for a patient and the response is, well, I need to see them.
Yeah.
Right. I can't just do this by looking at the information. I need to go and get a visual. I need to inspect and have that connection, that live connection.
Yes, absolutely.
And preserving that is essential. So I am at this point, since we have about 15 minutes left, I'm going to pause and open things up to our audience to see who else has questions for Dennis and give others an opportunity to learn. And certainly if you have questions, you can raise your hand, you can chime in, you can use the chat. Any of those would be fantastic. Otherwise, I have some extra questions to ask. Just don't want to be too greedy.
Yeah, or we don't have to talk about questions. I'm sure people have a lot to say. I always love to hear what Fred has to say.
Yeah, right.
What's the name of your rock band?
The Dennis Novack Experience, actually. Yeah. We're starting to rehearse now. Yeah. We had a lot of names, but we settled on that after we ran out of names. My first band was in 35 years ago. It was Dr. No and Dr. No and the Bony Landmarks. That was our first. Then we were the Night Nurses. Then we were DNR, but we started playing AIDS benefits, so we had to change our name. That was in the early days. Yeah. So yeah, it's been great. It's been great fun. It's mostly with medical students.
We have a really great question from the chat, and that is, what are the next important areas of research in your view?
Well, I'd like to know. Well, there are several things. I don't know if Adina Khaled is still here. Adina and her colleagues have been very interested in studying professional formation, and it's very time intensive, and we're really just at the beginning of that, and I'd like to know more about that, because there are studies that suggest that medical students don't really evolve all that much if you're looking at Keegan's levels of moral maturity or emotional maturity. Most and we did a study that suggested that about slightly over 50% of our third-year medical students are in Keegan stage 3, kind of that socialized mind and respect for authority, and willing to subvert patient preferences to their own learning needs and so on. So I think how do you promote real personal growth? Can you look at some of the components of personal growth that are so important for doctor-patient communication and care? Emotional regulation, for example. A lot of people come to emotional regulation, in their 60s and 70s. They sort of start figuring it out. Can't we do that? For medical students, get them to know their emotional triggers and modulate their responses to them. So, I think personal and professional growth is a big area. but there are two. There's kind of a push and pull for professionalism. We create our definitions of professionalism. We get students to take oaths. We get them to aspire to those, to being a certain way related to those oaths of what a professional should be. But how do they migrate towards actually, being a person who expresses, who behaves in the way that they pledged to at the beginning? And I guess that's personal growth. But there's something about your how true you are to your core values, and can we study that evolution through medical school, and can we push that forward? I think there's a lot of work to be done in interprofessional professionalism, because we've definitely evolved over the years. When I was training, the doctor was always the leader of the team, and often a lone cowboy, and saw themselves as as heroes and so on, and solely responsible. And that's, you can't do that anymore. The complexity of care demands that you become a member of a team and trust and honor and understand what everybody else in the team can do, and sometimes become a follower. So we have to help people evolve in their work in interprofessional teams, and there is a method to that madness, and we have to study that. So I think there's there's an enormous amount. We're doing work. Julie is here. Julie Agris is leading up a research project in organizational professionalism. If we want to change individuals, we have to work just as hard on changing cultures, institutional cultures, because you can get evolved all you want, but if you can also get beaten down pretty easily by your institutional culture. So we need to work on, how do we change institutional culture? What does that involve? And what are the aspirations that people need to make that happen, in management? So, well, I'm sorry, I could go on for a little while. There's a lot to be done. And the people that are here today are going to be the ones that do it and take that leadership role.
I think a lot about the organizational culture piece as well. The work that we've done here at Gundersen with advanced care planning, and there's been a notable shift in how our physicians think about conversations with patients around goals of care. We've never measured it, and one of the challenges there is trying to figure out, what do you measure and how, right? How do you measure culture shifts? Another great question that is coming from the chat: do you think things like rituals and activities like oath taking and white coat ceremonies really make an impact on student development and attitudes from your perspective?
Well, I think they're important. They have to, if you just do a one-off and you have a white coat ceremony and everybody raises their hand and takes an oath, it just becomes a little bit of a ritual. And people, for many years, we did sort of the classical Hippocratic oath. And some of it just didn't even make sense, and there was a part of it that I swear or affirm, depending on, your beliefs and whether swearing was okay, and what would students say? They would go, I swear or affirm that, that I, whatever, they were just words. But if you couch it in sessions, that really take apart and go deep into what the concepts mean, and in historical concepts, context, I think they can be useful. I don't have any proof of that, because I haven't seen any studies that look at changes in attitudes before and after. But I do think it's important, because it does set a tone and a scene. And if you have a whole curriculum, the longitudinal curriculum in professionalism and professional development, as we do at Drexel, you get a chance to revisit all of those and get people to understand something about the oaths they took. And you got to get them. I mean, we do an ethics OSCE, for example, and we have some professionalism related stations in that ethics OSCE, so they get to perform and try out behaviors and then realize, how they might be deficient in terms of keeping the oaths that they took. And that makes them think and perhaps change their attitude. So, so I don't think the oath per se makes a difference, but I think it is an important part of creating the aspirations that you can later come back to.
And there's a couple of other comments here related to oaths, and it's kind of interesting because I think there's a different question here to be addressed. So I think one is, have you ever had students that you've worked with who denied taking the oath or indicating they aren't committed? And I think on a flip piece of this, I think we certainly say that the oath is important for the students to take. Is it just as important for those who have taken the oath, right? And the teachers to know that their students have taken this oath and that they are being inducted into this new world of being a medical professional?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it seems like a secret society the way you say it. I think, it's good to have shared meanings for sure. But I think I haven't ever come across a student or resident who says, "Oh, well, I never said I would be, honest." What? No, or with my patients. Sometimes you can't, I haven't seen that, but there's a different concept, a continuum that I have been curious about over the years, which is the job calling continuum. So I did a study, 30 years ago, where we looked at our residents' well-being, and we looked at anxiety and depressive and stress and burnout, and we asked a single question: where do you put yourself on this continuum? On the left side of the VAS, it said, "I do medicine. Medicine is a job, a means to a good income." And on the right side, the anchor was, medicine is a calling. I am a physician. And it turned out that the residents who indicated that they were more towards the right side of I am a physician, this is who I am, they had a lot less negative attitudes, anxiety and depression and so on. And you can understand that, because if this is what you're called to do, this is who you are, you can put up with a lot, Residency is not a great job. So if you're, for you it's a job, you're not going to be that happy. So I think that sort of brings into focus that idea of professional formation. If, like the Cruces say, put at the top of that pyramid, Miller's pyramid, B, BE, I am a physician. I think, act, and behave. I behave like a physician. I think this is my identity. That's the highest level of their pyramid, and that's what they're aiming for in all of the education that we're trying to do in terms of professionalism, professional formation.
Very good. There are certainly more questions to be asked, and there are some in the chat that we're not going to get a chance to get to, and I apologize. We just want to make sure we keep everybody on time and be respectful of that. So, Dennis, are there any final thoughts or advice that you would want to give to those who are listening, who are hopeful to make a similar impact, either within the realm of medical professionalism or just in general in the world?
Oh, general advice?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Don't take anything personally.
That's helpful.
That's that's a good one. I used to get upset. I think I'm a pretty good lecturer, but always about 10% of students would go, what is he talking about? Well, what is all this fuzzy wuzzy humanistic stuff? Why do I have to listen to this? And I used to take that personally. Wow, everybody doesn't like what I have to offer. Wow, but that's where they are. That's that's where they are in their lives. They're going into a profession where they don't think that's a specialty where they don't think that's particularly important. Or maybe they're depressed too. There's a lot of burnout among our medical students, and they tend to have negative views of things. So, yeah, so you can't take things personally. This last paper that we got published, which I think is a pretty good paper, went through 12 iterations, in 4 different journals. We finally got it published, and it's getting cited, and so you just have to stick to it. And work with good mentors if you can find a great mentor. I mean, George Engel, I stayed in touch with George Engel until 6 months, just a few months before he died, and he was always great. Sometimes I didn't take his advice. One of my earlier papers, he advised me. He wrote back to me and said, "Don't peddle this manuscript. You can't you can't write this kind of paper until you're my age. But I peddled it. They got published, and it was all right. So, but he was, if you can find yourself a good mentor that inspires you, and that will help your career, that would also be a great thing. And if you're new, if you haven't joined our organization yet, if you're on this call when you haven't joined, then you should join, because I think you'll get quite a lot out of it. Yeah, there you go.
Good. Well, thank you, Dennis. This has been extremely insightful, delightful. It's I don't know about others who are on this call, but this is a real treat for me. So thank you for letting me indulge everybody and asking all these questions of Dennis, and certainly look forward to our continued collaborations through APHC. Before I mute myself, I also want to go through a couple of just brief housekeeping things. But more than that, actually.
Tom, just say you've been a magnificent president. You still are president for another 6 months. So keep up the good work, and thank you for this interview. I thought we were going to have more of a conversation, with me asking you questions too. But it's great the way you did it. I really appreciate it.
Well, my goal was to learn, so that was fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
Before I mute myself, I want to make sure I extend a huge thank you to our event organizers. If you've enjoyed or learned anything from APHC content over the last couple of years, you should really thank our fantastic administrative director, Barbara Lewis. She keeps the trains churning, and I certainly couldn't do this work without her help. If you've enjoyed or learned anything from the past few virtual conferences, especially today's, you need to join me in thanking Elizabeth Katcher and Luan Everson for their amazing work leading our program committee and our previous program committee chairs. So thank you. Amazing, amazing work. I can't thank you enough, actually. And then again, so before I hope to see you all, before I mute, I hope to see you all at our next in-person conference in 2022. That will be hosted by Drexel University. That's our plan, at least. And thank you all again for attending today. And now I'm going to turn things back over to Elizabeth and Luan for some additional closing remarks. So thanks, everybody.